Chapter 20. Tori sat at the table. At times, she felt lucky that she lived in a society that could understand and respect the art of dance. Now that she sees the people she performs for, she came to the conclusion that they saw it only as entertainment and nothing more. These people made her feel like a trained monkey. Why did she keep such company? Because they were her family and a part of her life. She explained this to the silent faces when the father of the boys asked her what was troubling her. She included that she also felt a love for them, even though she questioned that inside herself. But this was no time to be brutally honest. "We don't mean to make you feel like that, dear," Russell, the father, said. "Oh, Dad, it's not our fault. We can't help being the way we are. She just wants more attention," Reginald said. "That's not fair, Reggie. My income from dancing supplements yours to give us the lifestyle we have. And I am grateful for that. But you don't see me pointing out what I do for a living. It's just work." "It's not just work for me. I pay close attention to your hobbies because it's what you like to do." "Then get a hobby and I'll return that attention." "Dancing is my hobby." He looked away. "Really, Reggie, it's not just my work, it's my art. I do what it is I like for a living, and I'd just like some recognition for it." "I give you recognition. I think you dance beautifully. You compliment the finished product. You don't see what kind of work goes into it. I know how much time you put into it. Most nights I'm asleep before you even get home from rehearsal. I sleep alone even though I'm married. I know how much you sacrifice to do it." His voice was getting louder and betraying his waning temper. "It's not a sacrifice," he glared at her. "I mean to say, you could come to rehearsal every now and again. Surprise me so I don't have to take a taxi home. Then you might get a feel for what I do." "I don't want to get a feel for what you do. I see what you do. I know what you do. Why do I have to give more?" "I just want you to understand me at least one fraction of how Tony did. You don't have to be a dancer to understand one." He stood and yelled, "I've told you not to bring his name to this table! Reginald!" Russell shouted louder than everyone. The whole room fell silent. Reggie turned to face his father. Russell motioned, and Reginald took his seat. After the room's attention was no longer on the table, the patriarch spoke. "Reggie, I'm embarrassed by your temper. The name of her former husband should not evoke such rage from you. I think we're all flattered here that Tori feels comfortable enough with us that she expresses her true feelings. We're all family, and as the head of this family, I tell you to pay mind to the words of your wife. She's telling you this for a reason." "Dad, she just wants to embarrass me in front of the family. She is not one of your conniving business associates. She is your wife, your other half. She is telling you this to make things better between you two. Am I right, dear?" Tori nodded her head, stunned that Russell had come to her defense. "See, Reggie? She loves you. That's why she's telling you this." There was a silence for a moment. "I think you should remain quiet for the duration of the meal. Think about what she said tonight, and for God's sake, learn to control that temper." Russell turned his attention to the appetizers, and there was a silence until Judy started up the conversation again. Tori put a hand on Reggie's, but he pulled his away and stared straight ahead. The rest of the meal went pretty well. Reggie kept quiet the whole time. Tori participated in the conversation and, for the first time, felt the joy inside this family's unit. They ate and laughed and drank. Soon the evening drew to a close. Outside the door, the members all said their goodbyes until next week. Russell hugged Tori and spoke in a low voice. "Don't worry about it, dear. He's a good boy, and he'll come around in time. He just has some stubborn pride to work through." He kissed her on the cheek. She smiled and was surprised to feel her cheeks blush bright red. Reginald took her arm and waved goodbye to his father. Russell waited in front of the restaurant until all his kids had sped away in taxis. Then he walked to his car and commenced a lonely drive home. The tension in the taxi was thicker than molasses in January. Tori looked at Reginald as he gazed out the window, refusing to look at her. "Are you going to stay like this forever?" No answer. "The dinner's over. You can talk again." She said it with a smile. He turned to her with anger on his brow. Her smile faded under his stare. He turned back to the window. "You can't stay mad at me forever, Reggie." "Want to bet?" he said coldly, not looking at her. She'd wait until they got home. She looked out the other window, and they rode in silence. The taxi went beyond the city's limits and drove them into the suburb that they lived in. When they pulled up to the house, Reggie handed the driver $15 and grumbled a "keep it" before opening the door and walking quickly to the front door. Tori wished the cabbie a good night and followed her husband. He shut the door behind him. She fished through her pocketbook and got her keys out. She opened the door to see Reggie by the bar in the living room, emptying a glass. "Why are you acting like such a child?" she asked him. He turned around. "I don't appreciate you embarrassing me in front of my family." "They're my family too. If I can't speak freely in front of them, then who can—" "Oh, bullshit! When was the last time you spoke your mind in front of them?" They were yelling at the same time now, the strange magnetism of passion bringing them closer together in the room until they were inches apart, yelling in each other's faces. "I thought it was understood that we were just a couple at those dinners. I'm not going to just sit there and be a trophy wife for you to show off to your brothers. I'm a person, damn it, Reggie, I'm your wife." "Then why does my wife put me on the spot in front of my family? Maybe this could help us be closer. Maybe it'll help you be closer to them. If I wanted to be closer to them, then I would make the effort on my own. No one wants to be close in that family. We're not a family. We're a once-a-week dinner party. Then maybe this was to help us get closer. We have a lot of unsaid things between us, and it's about time you weren't sent into a fit every time I brought up Tony." He swung at her and slapped her across the face with enough force to knock her to the floor. She was stunned for a moment, not believing that he had just hit her. She looked up at him, feeling a slow trickle of blood run out of her mouth. "I told you not to bring his name here." He had a crazy fire in his eyes. He was rolling up his sleeves. "Do I have to do this to get my point across?" He kicked her in the ribs. "Do I have to do this to teach you?" She held the dinner down and caught her breath. He grabbed her hair and shoulder and pulled her to her feet. He punched her in the stomach. Her knees weakened, but he held her up and threw her against the door. She felt herself start to cry. He was coming towards her. She lunged at him and dug her nails into his face. He grabbed her hands and threw her to the side, falling back onto the floor. He felt the blood on his face and became enraged. She got to her feet and opened the door. Running out, she slipped off the step and fell onto the cement walkway. She turned to see him coming at her. She crawled to her feet and ran up the driveway on the side of the house, screaming at him to stop. He ran after her and pushed her to the ground. Picking her up, he punched her in the back of her head and she fell forward. Her head bounced off the ground. Only the moistness of her tears kept her awake. She heard his voice grow louder as he walked nearer. She couldn't make out the words. She laid on the ground, waiting. She thought she heard herself call Tony's name. He didn't hit her again. She heard a scuffle and looked up to see the dark image of someone holding Reggie over his head. Reggie was thrown full force against the side of the house and fell to the ground. He slid along the wall to get to his feet. The figure moved ominously closer to him. Reggie swung, and the figure ducked, coming up and forward to grip Reginald's face and lift him off the ground, pressing him against the wall. Reggie struggled with the figure, but to no avail. A voice hissed out words. "Go easy, my son, into the infinite from which you came. Your destiny is done." There was silence, and the figure looked towards Tori, then back to his prey. He squeezed Reggie's face harder and spoke again. "You're not worthy." He flipped Reginald around like a rag doll and drove his head into the pavement. His head cracked on contact and leaked out red-pink fluids and solids. Tori turned away in disgust and shivered with fright. Lying on the ground, she threw up the entire dinner. As she spat out the last of the vomit, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She cringed away and slowly turned around to see a silhouette of a man. "Don't be afraid, Tori." Her eyes adjusted to the light, and she could make out the features of Tony's face. His eyes were a bright green. She threw her arms around him and began to cry out of joy. "I knew you'd come back to me." He held her. "I've gained a power, knowledge, and I'm sorry for what I put you through. It was all part of it, though. Trust me, it was all needed." They were silent. She brought her face off his shoulder and cradled his face in her hands. They were forehead to forehead. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "Yes, I do." Tears were running down her cheeks. "I trust you." She wondered where his right arm was. It was not holding her. She heard the click of a firing pin and felt a barrel on the back of her head set perfectly so that the bullet would rip through both their skulls. Her eyes opened wide. "I love you," he said in a whisper. The last thing she heard was the deafening sound of a gunshot.